So I just want to say thank you all and thank you to our panelists for being here tonight. I want to say first, of course, that we're on unceded Algonquin territory here in Ottawa. And my name is Gareth Davies. I am the co-producer of CRAFTFEST, along with Amanda, who's here from Freewheeling Craft. My store in Hintonburg is called Maker House. We now showcase over 120 Canadian handmade artists who create furniture and homeware and local gifts. For this year, for 2017, Maker House really wanted to run an event outside of the store and chose this location for its history and for the location downtown near the river, and the opportunity to work with Zibi as a sponsor. One of my goals with this was also to build personal connections with Algonquin and First Nations artists and individuals. So we appreciate the chance to host an evening of dialogue, and thank you all for coming. So I'll introduce our panelists, and as the moderator, I'll guide us through questions that we plan to discuss. Please note that we don't expect to resolve any of these topics tonight. Our hope is just to increase awareness, maybe build some new connections, and allow the dialogue to continue. Please take the chance to meet someone new, and let's hang out more often. So, Samantha Tenasco is an Algonquin Anishinabeg living in Kitigan, Zibi, Anishinabeg. She's a cultural resource person with notable experience in major development projects. She's a recent grad in events management and business administration HR. She's passionate about increasing the profile and increased inclusion for Algonquin culture in Ottawa-Gatineau, Algonquin Nation territory. Samantha is an instructor in the Aboriginal Studies program at Algonquin College and is currently building her own company for Algonquin-specific event needs and cultural resource work in the nation's capital. She has a daughter and spends her downtime on and off the ice at hockey arenas. Volunteerism is huge for Samantha, and so is giving back to her community. Give her a round of applause. Michel Lacroix. He's a First Nations artist from Ottawa. He's a talented local painter, breakdancer, and community builder. He's a second-generation Algonquin, with many of his friends, elders, and chiefs divided on the issues of Zibi and the development plans for these islands. He grew up around the corner from Chief Willem Commanda, and he knows well of his teachings and vision. Growing up with political awareness, as his mother worked for the Bank of Canada, he has a keen awareness of the issues surrounding tonight's topics. Michel lives in the city, just up the road, so what happens here directly affects him. He's worked on the islands and has been coming here for over 10 years to various events and activities. Michel teaches at Algonquin College, so he understands the importance of a good education. He's a member of Ottawa Friendship Center and loves the community. He's young and hopeful in a better Canada for all. Thank you, Michel. And Christina Ruddy, thank you for coming all the way from Pikwàkanagàn, just under 2 hours away, I suppose, yeah. So she's operations manager at the Algonquin Way Cultural Center. Let me try to pronounce this. Omami Winini? Close. Can you give it to me? Omama Winini. One more knee. And say the second word. Pamajowin. All right. I'll get the better at that. It's located on the reserve at Pikwàkanagàn, just under 2 hours from here, west of Ottawa. It's a community museum and gift shop, which works to revive, enhance, and protect the cultural traditions, language, and arts of Algonquins of Pikwàkanagàn First Nation. She works closely with Chief Kirby Whiteduck and the Band Council. Christina is open to dialogue and passionate about building a good relationship within and outside her community to grow the influence and awareness of her people and their interests, along with all First Nations and Canadians. She just launched a new cultural pavilion across the street, Victoria Island, on Tuesday, where Algonquin artwork and artifacts will be on display for the next 6 months. And that's in partnership with the NCC and other stakeholders, including Kitigan Zibi in Maniwaki. So welcome, Christina. Thanks for coming. All right, and Dr. Millette has worked on Indigenous land matters for approximately 20 years. I won't say all the letters beside his name, but he has many designations, and he's also a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. He's Director of Strategic Planning and Communications with the First Nation Land Management Resource Center. He specializes in land use planning, land strategizing, and land use economic development interfacing, with an aim at empowering individual communities through self-governing over unique sets of land and resources. As a registered professional planner, he has worked throughout Canada and within a variety of legal land frameworks, including treaty and framework agreement on First Nations lands. Millette enhances his planning outlook through several academic and research initiatives. As a registered professional archaeologist, he maintains a research program on ancient planning techniques and their relevance within contemporary planning models. I'll probably skip a couple things here. He's an adjunct professor in the History and Theory of Architecture program at Carleton University. He teaches Indigenous architecture. Concurrently, he's completing a book on Indigenous communities across Canada, documenting successes in planning and architecture. Thanks for taking the time today. And Jeff Westeinde, who's on the panel, but he's ad hoc here, just outside the circle and completing the circle. He's an active investor, entrepreneur, and he's the executive chairman of the Windmill Development Group, one of Canada's most environmentally and socially sustainable real estate developers. He's been named Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young, named one of Canada's top 40 under 40 by the Globe and Mail, recognized with the Young Alumni Award from the University of Western Ontario, and he's been awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for distinguished service to Canada. His businesses have included Canada's fastest growing companies and top 50 employers in Canada. He's an honorary colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces. I learned that. He's the founding chairman of Invest Ottawa, who actually, that organization was very helpful getting my company off the ground. And he's founding vice chair of Bayview Yards Innovation Center. He's an avid outdoorsman. His passions include mountain climbing. He's summited 3 of the world's 7 summits, skiing, golfing, and fishing, but they're all a distant second behind his love for his family. Thanks, Jeff, for being here. And just a round of applause again for all the panelists for taking the time. So yeah, this is really nice to have everyone here, and I think everyone would agree these are important topics, so we do appreciate you taking the time. I'm just going to kick it over now. I've been speaking far too much. And this microphone is really for you guys. So I'll ask a question, and you can each take up to 5 minutes as long as you'd like to speak about it. And we'll just keep it informal. If it veers into a new direction, that's great, and I'll try to keep us on track. So first I'll ask you, Samantha, what your thoughts are on the future of reconciliation and how private enterprise in particular can engage in a meaningful way with First Nations communities.
Great. Again, I'd like to say thank you for welcoming here. I think it's nice that you're looking for Algonquin voices in this day and age, and it's just the future for us here at Zibi. Partnerships with people are big. Anyway, for reconciliation and work with private sector, I think it's employing suppliers, finding employment for young people. I think we have a lot to showcase within our culture and to really increase the profile for Anishinabeg people in the city of Ottawa. I think projects with public and private sector are just the start here. I think we're very groundbreaking in what we're doing here at Zibi, and we're going to take this model and we're going to work this across the city. And hopefully we're breaking into all different sectors, private, public. I think that Algonquin music and arts and lifestyle should be known to all people in the city.
All right, that's wonderful. Does anyone want to add to that or ask any questions about that? Or just state your own thoughts? Yeah. Yeah.
I think she said mostly how I feel. I think investment's really important. So I went with a couple of friends to Spark Street, some of the souvenir shops, and asked if they would sell some of our local art, and they said no. And I was really surprised about that. So I think investing really into the art and the beauty of the art is, I could talk about that for the rest of my life, really. Yeah, I guess I would just say that empowering and investing, but not just like a shop on Spark Street, really making it feel like Anishinabeg, keeping some of the traditions alive, I think, rather than just like nice paintings all the time. try to keep the teachings there. And so to me, like culture and politics really affect each other. Like the politics affect the culture of Canada. So empowering the Algonquin culture is important also on a political kind of plane.
Nice.
I know politics is tough to shy away from, but I believe that culture and politics blend.
Thank you.
Lately I've attended a lot of things that the first question is reconciliation. And I listened to a podcast recently that really touched me about that. So I think that Windmill sets a great example. But the truth about reconciliation is that it's not just a new concept for people who are new to this country within the last 150 years, but it's also a new word for us, and it's a new vision for us. And if you asked me and asked everybody around what their vision of reconciliation looked like, it would all be different. You ask a First Nations person sitting next to me, their vision of reconciliation might be different. So what I always say when it comes to reconciliation, no matter what the issue is try. Don't be afraid to just try. Even if it turns out you did it wrong, try again. So I think that private enterprise, one of the biggest problems is the fear to try, and then they do it wrong, and then that's it, they're done. So I think the biggest issue right now is just giving people permission to try reconciliation, because nobody really knows what the end result looks like, but we have to try.
Very good answer.
Yeah, I love that. That's it. I don't have.
We're shy.
Well, the notion of trying, I think, it's such a good point, because I'm asked to talk all the time about with non-Indigenous companies, institutions. What do we do? Well, try, right? And then the first step that I always say it, and you've heard me say this, is what's wrong with an organization saying we could have done better and going from there? When you say that inside your heart, you say, geez, we could have done better. That's the way you start trying, right? In my own work, I'm working with a community right now that I'm not going to name, because I don't talk about the communities that I work with directly, but I'll say where the strategy that we've come up with in terms of reconciliation, in terms of how we think it, and it's a planning. I'm a planner, and we came up with this 7-step process, and it's a facility that we're going to the community is going to build. Okay, so the first part was engaging the community. Now, not just engaging in a peripheral way, but really engaging to the point of embedding people in the community. Okay? And that phase is just done now. And then the next phase is design, facility design, but including the community full on in the design. So whatever architectural firm is going to get hired to do the design, they will have to, within the RFP, show how they're going to include the community in the design process. Okay. Then, remember my 7 steps. Then the same thing goes, so that they're not in this traditional territory, they're north. The design will have to include materials from the traditional territory, okay? So the third phase will be to have community members, not just adults, but youth, out in the traditional territory getting some of the materials for parts of the project. That's the third part. The fourth part is obvious, and there's lots of precedents out west for this, is including community members in the construction phase, but not just as laborers, the token kind of job, but within trades and apprenticeships. That's 4. Is it 4? The fifth one is, the fifth one is in the construction budget and in its timeline, allowing, if you will, the community to organize a gala for the opening. Not one that everybody has to scrounge, but a real gala that people are aiming for. So in the budget, embedded in the project, right? The sixth part will be to involve the community members in the programming of the activities in that facility. So it's not just going to be one person determining what's going to go on. There'll be a committee that's involved in the programming and in the management. And then the final one, for the O&M, the operations and maintenance, it'll be community member involvement as well. So it's kind of, that's from a planning and design perspective, right? In terms of how do you involve people, how do you increase the benefits to the community, the intangible stuff beyond 3 jobs and a check and leave. How do you get people in, right? So that's kind of one example that I can use as a way to start to try, right? Okay,
that's great perspective for sure. And you can pass the mic back, and I'll take it over here for the next question. Well, Jeff as well, yeah. So Jeff's sitting outside over here. We can get his thoughts as well on this question.
Yeah. So to the question of what can the private sector do around reconciliation, I'd say we have a long way to go. Long way to go. If you look at a couple of personal disappointments, I think the TRC did some great work. 94 recommendations. You have to read to the 92nd one before it mentions what can private enterprise do. So many of them say the state shall, the government shall, the crown shall. What can I as a private citizen or a private corporation do? And the TRC isn't meant to fix everything, but it is indicative of the fact that I think so many Canadians and so many Canadian businesses rely on our government to really be the one that needs to take the front line on reconciliation. I think that's wrong. And I think private corporations have a responsibility. I'm not going to use the word duty because it gets confused with the legalese, but have a responsibility to ensure that when they are generating wealth and generating opportunity on someone's traditional territory, that there is a participation there. And depending on what they're doing, if it's on Crown land, it's relatively well defined what they have to do. When it's not Crown land, there's no rule book. And to the extension of, or to your point about trying, I think they have to try. They have to be prepared to go and get beat up at it too. That's going to be part of what we've got to do as a nation. There was a lot of history behind us. But probably the biggest single thing that I think the private sector needs to do to fuel reconciliation is actually to educate the rest of Canada. The number of training sessions that we've done with our team here at Windmill, thanks to Sam and members of KZ, thanks to members of PIC, coming down and just explaining the history, the tradition, the knowledge, their viewpoints. Those are things that many people don't know. There's 634 First Nations in Canada. Many people don't know how many languages there are. They have this vision that the First Nations were they were all the same. That you can't reconcile with people that you don't know or understand or haven't taken the time to get to know. So I think I'm extremely hopeful, by the way. I think there's a groundswell of support in Canada right now, and I think so many people want to do the right thing. But there is no rule book. There's no guidebook. You're out there on your own. And I think one of the best things we can do is education. I'm thrilled to see it getting more education in the school system. When I went to school, I'm embarrassed to say I grew up here. I didn't know this was Algonquin traditional territory as a kid. Mm-hmm. Well, how can you not know that, right? It's shocking, and I don't think that's actually in some instances it still is, but it's less and less the case. So those things are good to see.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's that's true for me as well. I don't think I realized that until moved to Ottawa a few years ago. Now you hear politicians saying it at the start of their speeches, and I think that's the political level getting out there. But I can speak just really briefly as a private enterprise. My perspective is the same as Jeff's. That there's no rule that you need to engage as a private company. But there is, I think, a responsibility, and I think there's also a huge reward for doing so, because the immense untapped potential of these relationships and integrating the skills and the talents of First Nations communities into any business, really, especially one like mine, which is based around arts and culture and commerce and trading, really. So I'm really excited through this to connect. Things also happen faster through private enterprise. It's so much less formal. You can just do what you decide to do together. So that for me is a big reason why it's such an important pillar, and it's disappointing to hear that it was number 92 on the list of 94 recommendations, because it is where things can happen at a much faster pace. So let's pass it back to Michel, who has a thought.
Just to add, I think it gave me the idea with doing better. So private enterprises, you want the people to feel at home that come to Zibi, the Algonquin people to feel welcome. I think that part of that welcoming is not just having the art. So my friend is getting commissioned by the NCC to do a bronze statue with the eels and the sturgeons and the fish on the Kitigan. But I guess it'd be interesting also for the private investors, and you're definitely started this mandate of being able to fish again for eel and sturgeon, and that would make us feel more welcome to have that sort of mandate as well.
Yeah, that's probably a very fair point. A lot of the time it's like, well, the symbolism is here, and so the art is here, but it's like, where's the actual participation, the hands-on activities and the cultural traditions? Okay, and the fear of trying that Christina mentioned, I think, is also very big. It's so easy to be afraid. It's so easy to mess up, really, and offend, and you have to be kind of just swallow your pride and swallow that fear and be open to being better and learning, really, right? And the other side as well needs to be understanding, like you said, right? So I think that's really important. All right, question number 2, and thank you for all the very thoughtful answers on our first question. So let's talk about the need for First Nations heritage and history in urban planning, and let's include, because this sounds like symbolism to me, let's include that activity, that participation, that hands-on activity.
Okay, for me, I need to see our representation in urban planning for our future. We've got many kids, and if you look throughout history, prime ministers change, industry changes. The only constant that's ever been in this town has been the Anishinabeg. We're not going anywhere. We need to start integrating that into urban planning, into architecture, so people like my daughter here, 12 years old, ready to go to college in the next 5-6 years, you know.
Yeah.
We'll see that and we'll feel welcome in these institutions and take part in society in Ottawa and make this a better place for Ottawa youth who need to learn about Anishinaabe people with the support of industry by including us in urban development, in cultural learning, increasing education programs. That's the real need for me, is that we need to leave a legacy and we need to tell our story and increase that representation for our people.
All right, thank you.
Wow. So heritage is such a big word, and so much has changed in the history of Canada in terms of heritage, and this is an epicenter, the islands. So let's hope we can get things reconciled, healed. To me, it's very difficult to I can kind of see what could happen in the future, but there's just so much that needs to be done. So we had a sunrise ceremony on Victoria Island 2 days ago, and the ceremony was around the gated building, and it didn't feel like it was great to see that and to be around some of my friends, and the ceremony still being alive in the center of Canada, but it was by an abandoned colonial building on an island called Victoria Island. So, and to me, in terms of heritage of Canada, it's time to embrace the language, the word Zibi. It's time to embrace the word Ottawa, to trade. It's time to not just little, like really bring back just so many beautiful traditions, like the sunrise ceremony. I think was huge. So it's hard because some people don't want to come and bring the tradition back to the parliament. So I think it's about making big changes. I think would be really nice to see in Canada, even in the courts.
You mean outside on the building facade or inside the courts? Yeah.
One thing that always comes up for me when we talk about this kind of topic is when I was young, I flew to Vancouver. And the instant I walked off that plane, I knew I was in Salish, Haida territory. I knew I was. I couldn't forget I was, because at every point I turned, even in the airport, in the street, there was something that represented their culture within the city, always. And that was part of the disconnect for me. When I moved home, back to Pikwàkanagàn, everybody was like, oh, you want to go shopping, go to Ottawa, you want to go do this, you want to do that, go to Ottawa. And I'm like, it's a concrete jungle. There's no color, it's a beautiful city, but it doesn't come alive with heritage, right? So for me, I think, and not only for Algonquin people, but it's common knowledge that Ottawa is a major spot for Inuit people, and their survival rates here are important too, for all the First Nations people and Inuit people. And so there needs to be some kind of change that happens, that visually you're comforted in the city, that you see yourself as part of the city, that the youth who come here to go to college and go to university and get jobs need to be able to see themselves. My friend worked for private industry, and she's Cree, and she could get away with anything she wanted because she checked that box for them. It wasn't meaningful. It was just a box that they checked, and she could get away with anything. She left for a week and never came back to work. And just showed up back to work one day, and nobody said anything because she checked the box, right? So that's where things need to change, is that not just make it visual, but make it meaningful. So we need to, and the biggest part of that is involving our youth, always our youth. Our youth need to be at the table for everything, because they're the ones who need to see themselves here so that they can be successful here.
Great answer.
Well, back to planning and heritage, stick with that. To me, heritage, it's a word that's, the definitions has changed over time, and it's appropriated, and heritage was used hundreds of years ago here by the colonizers, right? So that's why we have Victoria Island. The heritage was twisted into somebody else's heritage, right? So when I think of connecting heritage to urban planning or land use planning, even in an Indigenous context, I think of place names, I think of traditional sites, I think of a little bit of archaeology, but traditional sites is a big one, because that's real, and it's not just about the past, it's about the past being lived in the present, and that's heritage that's alive. It's not a museum kind of heritage, it's alive. And so in a planning context, I think that acknowledging a place where things took place within the plan, I think that goes a long way in terms of celebrating the notion of heritage, right? So there's nothing wrong with acknowledging all kinds of things, but there's priorities. If we connect it back to the first question of reconciliation, the definition of heritage in the case of reconciliation has to shift. Okay, so if we think of around here, the definition of heritage here is not the same as the definition of heritage in my hometown or in London, England, or in wherever, right? The definition of heritage here is specific to the heritage of the people from here, and that changes things. So if you make the definition of heritage, if you connect it directly to the people who are here, the priorities are different. So back to traditional use, back to place names and things like that. Because you have to be careful with heritage, I think, because people tend to connect it in terms of Indigenous culture from non-Indigenous points of view, they connect it to archaeology because it's a real thing. We found the thing, right? But that's not it to me. That's not. It's more about sites of significance. Do you follow what I mean? So I think the notion of heritage has to change from material culture, which is important, but acknowledge the intangible cultural heritage that happened in time and space, kind of in the spot, right? So then, if you do that, then you can designate sites. And back to the urban planning, you can designate sites, you can designate place names, and so on. And so, if you start designating sites and place names, it becomes part of people's lived experience in your day-to-day. So even a non-Indigenous kid, or me, or anybody else, who rides their bike through a path, after a while you start to register the cues. And if the cues are well done in terms of a planning context, you're acknowledging, you don't even have to have a big sign and a big show of it. It's part of the fabric, right? So to make my point, and then I'll shut up, to make my point, if you go on almost any reserve community in Canada, it's a grid plan, orthogonal plan that the Europeans implanted on the reserve. So you got streets running, quadrangle streets. Well, I put it to you that even today, and I did a study on this actually, when you look at most of the communities, people don't walk, they drive their cars and trucks, sure, along the roads, but they cut across, right, and you have a whole other network that's subtle, right? Well, if in an urban planning context, those networks were studied and acknowledged, you would have a different register of heritage in terms of the urban plan. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of my I don't like my
Jeff, did you want to add anything?
Sure.
All right.
I think from a planning point of view, if you go right back to the very first principles of planning, I think First Nations thinking and values are becoming front and center across our plan out of necessity. So if you look at especially the Anishinabeg people who lived off the land, sustainability was a core principle. You could not overuse your resources or you wouldn't be here. Europeans came here and we were of the opinion that we could build anything we want, anywhere we want, and with the proper engineering and architecture, the rest doesn't matter. I think as the human race, we're quickly finding out that that is not the case. That no, we need to learn to live sustainably again, and the lessons of living sustainably are much more prevalent. Like I'm always amazed when we have Algonquin friends come up to the cottage, and just the things that you learn about living just even on a small piece of land, and those lessons getting implanted in overall master plans, overall urban plans. I won't talk about sort of the detailed planning. You guys did a great job of that, but that overlaying or overarching principle of living sustainably, I think is one that we're seeing not enough for my liking, but it's coming back to the forefront more and more these days.
That's some great answers. Michel has another thought here.
So I really enjoyed what you said about going and living off the land and knowing. So a lot of traditions have values in current society. So the waterfalls called pipe bowl falls because they resemble the pipe. And the pipe is very important in terms of teachings and ceremony. I'm not going to go into the teachings right now, but the gifting of tobacco and the medicine and just treating tobacco as medicine and not abusing it, I think would even just, it would help the general public, maybe not to smoke as much, So I feel a little bit that there's a bit of a loss of a heritage because back in the day, and there's documentation of this, is people would go to the falls. So I feel like that heritage is kind of lost because I don't really see that being we're able to teach that still with the hydro dam and all that. So there is a little bit of a loss there. I'm hopeful that we can keep on teaching some of these traditions for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah, it's so much of it has been lost, and then you can only imagine in some cases when you have a hydro dam, it's like how do you even get that back, right? How like could you ever even get to obviously where it was? Well, that's up for debate, I guess. But one thing I had a question to follow up about was when you talk about changing, Danielle, the definition of heritage. Um, That's defined, I assume, by at a city level mostly. Is it like the Heritage Committee of Ottawa that would define that locally, or I'm just curious who would define heritage, and then what mechanism would actually change that definition? Because I assume that's where it would need to change.
Well, everybody defines heritage. Yeah, most cities have heritage committees and heritage bylaws, but that's not the heritage that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the notion of heritage from a planning point of view. Every planner has, well, not everyone, but every creative planner has ways. Well, I give you an example. I worked with a community in British Columbia to do a land use plan of their reserve lands. How many community meetings do you think I had? 35. Okay? Find me a planner who'll do that. I'm not better than anybody else, but that's what it takes. If you go through 35 community meetings, and that's a small community that I did this for, you end up with their notion of heritage, not mine. I'm just the interpreter, right? You figure it out, it figures itself out through lots of meetings, right? Through lots of get-togethers. If you think about it. And eventually you get to a point where you realize, well, it's not going to be a grid, for example, right? And and certain sites are more significant than others. Oh, and certain place names are more prevalent than others. Oh, so, but you only get that maybe at meeting number 34 sometimes, because some elders don't want to tell you. They don't even want to tell other community members, some elders, right? So you only get there, and it takes a long time to get there. So that notion of heritage that I'm talking about, I think, is one that it comes from the community's heart, right? And you don't get to a heart that easy, as we all know. And that's...
Yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, no, that's perfect.
And I mean, just
Yeah.
get me going, because but one big thing that I learned over the years is the notion of listening. And I always thought, well, okay, that means I have to pay attention when someone talks, right? But it's more than that. It's to kind of get in the community by listening, but by having a kind of a certain amount of empathy, if you will, and trying to really live those words. You know what I mean? I think so. That's part of that process that gets closer to that community's heritage, whatever it might be. Right? It would be something here. It would be something else in Squamish or anywhere else. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It just depends. Yeah.
I had something to add there.
Yeah, please.
What I wanted to say was that as we're talking about heritage, it does come from an elder's circle, the value of that knowledge, the legends, the stories, the workmanship involved with that particular area. I mean, there could be a specific tree in that area and held in high regard because of medicinal value or bark for material-wise. That's where you really clue in depth in the community, is listening to those circles. And you're right, they do take more than 5 circles. I know in particular when we did it for Pimisi Station, we met with the artists, about 12 times. Yeah, and we went around day after day, and we really tuned into the heart of the artists we were working with. We had to bring them to our level and understand, and I understand what you mean. We listen to respond, but we should be listening to really understand. And it does take 12 circles. Yep. Yeah, you're completely valid on every point you made there, because I've seen it with heritage interpretive plans for the city here, that investment that we spoke of earlier and that value for the community and the real importance to share that culture and that love, it takes a good while.
Yeah, so patience and not necessarily following the rapid time frame that a normal project would follow, right? I think those are the habits that would need to shift for especially like private enterprise, where you're just trying to get things built and there's no rule that you need to have that patience. But the payoff is there in having a much more engaged community, having people actually like you, and just doing the right thing. So another follow-up on this one, because I find it really interesting, we've found out recently that the former U.S. Embassy is going to be turned into, I guess, an indigenous, is it a museum? I'm not quite sure exactly what the plans are. But, and this isn't something we'll know the answer to right now, but I'm wondering, just from your individual perspectives, what could be done with such a colonial, North American empire type building to, I guess, cleanse it, or to make it an actual home for Indigenous culture, if anything?
I'm gonna pass it forward. I don't really know how
Okay.
about the,
Is anyone familiar with this at all?
I don't know.
I think maybe like the AFN could move there, or Ottawa could run their programs out of there in terms of community. But I'd say it's an office space or like more of a political building. I don't really see the ability to share too much healthy knowledge there. Maybe, I don't know, a restaurant, but we already have an art gallery, a few of those. I think it's important to have, like, I'm really committed to healing, I think, is my thing, and living healing. So I think most MSCs are kind of corporate, so I think they should just shift the AFN there. And Ottawa needs a building. They're moving into the basement of a church right now. And I think there's an interesting form of reconciliation there too, or lack of. But yeah, so.
It's good.
I am actually also going to take a pass on this one as opening up a new building myself. I just kind of scanned that headline in the Facebook stream and said,
Okay.
I'll read that later.
Okay.
Maybe.
No problem.
The comments, what could be.
Yeah.
Well, as a planner, my thoughts on it, and I've thought a lot about it because I've been following the RAIC's comments on the building. I think the only value to the whole thing is the site. It's probably the most prominent site in the city facing Parliament. So I think a real better deal would have been from the federal government to, you can have the site, we'll take care of getting rid of the building.
Right.
That would have been highly symbolic in terms of getting rid of that architecture that's all about colonialism. We'll take care of it, we're gonna get rid of it. Then you can start to dream of, okay, a purpose, and then a new design that would be Indigenous led. Then on the most prominent site, not somewhere, wherever, right there, right smack there in the face of the Parliament, right? So you can, I'm not gonna get into that kind of design, but I think it would have been a better announcement to say it's the site that we want to free up, and we'll take care of getting rid of the building. That'll happen, whatever, right? So that's my thoughts on it. The building is highly inappropriate to me, right? Because it's full, it's loaded, but the site, to me, could be significant in terms of meaning facing the parliamentarians.
Wonderful.
Just a little suggestion. The site, I think, is still, even if it's torn down, is still stuck in the middle of colonization. And if anything, any form of heritage is right by the falls. So the building there, that's a part of, it's a heritage building on Victoria Island. It's like 3 beat up walls, like rock. Tear that down and build there. And then you could have your corporate kind of like office space running as an embassy and have a heritage center. Suggestion.
Yeah, I've got dreams and aspirations for that building as
Yeah.
well. I'd like to see residential school showcased with some good illustrations and some good photo evidence of true reconciliation from Canada in its direct view. I also want to see education programs for kids. I think we can make something out of it. I've seen both for and against views for the center, but I think it's something worthwhile for First Nations people. It's right in direct view of Parliament Hill. We can do something with it. And I think it should be used more for reconciliation. And then again, I think it needs to be led by Algonquin and Anishinabeg people. It's only right, serving that it's on our territory. The land underneath it, is the heartbeat of our people. So we have to take the lead there. That's really all I can say for that place. I don't know enough of what's taking place. I was a recent announcement, but I do want to see reconciliation and I want to see education programs there.
Yeah, I'd love to see that too. Jeff, are you good? Do you want us to move on to the next question? All right, awesome. So he's done well, as always. So the last question we have for the evening, and then we can open it up for any questions from the floor. What are your thoughts on the cultural needs of Canada? And this is a question that Michel had added because of the context of where we are here. Starting with the islands and the falls here, where we are, as a symbolic natural landmark.
Well, I'd like to see more openness and availability for people to see the falls. I think we need to tell the story of the Algonquin people here on the river. That's meaningful for me, is sharing that story about the history and the legacy of our ancestors owning this river. We had full control of this river at some point in time, and I want people to share that story and be open with not only Ottawa Gatineau, but also tourists, and tell that story and the richness of our heritage on this river. For me, that's reconciliation, and that's the goal of these projects that we do with private sector and public sector, is that we want to gain awareness for people, and then also to show that we've done something to take action against the colonialism and a lot of the negative things that have taken place over the last 150 years. And we're coming around, and we're coming back strong.
I think I already alluded to it a little bit. In terms of the waterfalls, there's so much beauty there, and there's a teaching there that needs, and I think the world is yearning for spirituality. I think we have we almost have a void in spirituality, and obviously a bit biased, but I think Anishinabeg traditions is like a real good compass for spirituality. So I hope that I think everyone can benefit from the islands. Like the hydro dam's there. I don't think it's going anywhere in my lifetime. And Jeff is working very well with Algonquin communities in terms of work, which is amazing. And I think everyone can benefit from the islands. And I'm more geared towards the idea of healing. I'm not going to be working for Jeff, I'm not in construction. But I think that I really do hope that some sort of healing idea or center, I really think that Victoria Island could be a great place. There's already a business that is, it gets burnt down, the wind blows down, something permanent needs to be there. And to me, everything's really already in that place. So I guess I offered the question to kind of give the suggestion that we continue looking at building something on Victoria Island in terms of a healing, kind of living healing center. I think that would help out a lot of people in different ways.
So, as Gareth knows, I had to ask directions how to get here because I was born in Ottawa and raised in Pikwàkanagàn, but I lived in more south towards Toronto when I was growing up, and I only moved back a few years ago. And so I got a crash course in the islands and Chaudière and Zibi when I moved back here and became friends with Jose and the other people in my community and started learning more. And I was like, all this controversy and all this other stuff. And I go back to, when I talk about these kind of developments and what should happen with these islands, I agree with you. When I when I'm around here, Victoria Island is where I'm drawn to, right? It's starting to feel a little bit more like home as I become familiar to it, and I believe Victoria Island is something that should be given back to the Algonquin people and led by the Algonquin people to revitalize it for our own use. I also think that, and this is probably can sound really cheesy, but my deep spiritual belief is that we're on the path that the Creator put us, and if we're on that path together, this is where we're supposed to be right now, even just sitting in this room together. And when I think about that, and I think about the values of Zibi and the One Planet Living, I mean, I did a lot of reading on that when I first moved home and I first heard about it, without knowing that I would ever be sitting here one day. But I supported Jose as a friend, and I think if people took the time to sit and quietly think about the value system and how aligned it is with our own value system, that there would be a lot less controversy. And I think that we could live harmoniously together within these islands. And I think the falls are beautiful, and I'm very excited for the work I'm about to do with Ottawa 2017 to allow people to see the falls again and do all that wonderful work that we're about to do with Chaudière Falls, and giving it back to our communities that way, visually at least, and providing Algonquin history on that. So I think that, and I don't know if I blew the top off something, but I know we did the press release, so I know we're allowed.
We need to hear more. We have to hear more.
So I mean, there's so many strides being made, but again, this is a project that's happening because of the 2017 year, and I had to hire a second assistant just so I could spend more time in Ottawa to do the work, the reconciliation work that I've been doing. And I mean, and I keep saying, when somebody says to me, "Can I talk to you about?" and I'm like, "Can that wait till January of 2018?" But somebody said to me at the opening of the pavilion the other day, they said, "Do you really think it's going to stop in 2018? That December 31st, 2017, all this is going to stop?" And I went, "Oh, crap." Maybe I'll sleep when I'm dead. All right, fine. So in the meantime, I might have to get an Airbnb in the city. So I've drawn away from your question, but again, I go back to the fact that I think we can all live together and get what each of us needs, because we are meant to be together here right now. So and I mean, that's my peaceful, loving self that comes out, and I believe that we need to treat each other with kindness, and that's what's been lost. And so a big part of our culture, and that's where I always lie when somebody comes to me with even what we did today or about the pavilion. I'm like, okay, how do I treat this from my cultural place and home, which is kindness? So, and I believe that development on Victoria Island and giving that back to the Algonquin people, and taking off our gloves and saying, oh wait, these are our values, it just looks different. So anyways, that was an awfully long spiel. I hope.
That was wonderful.
I don't remember the question.
Cultural needs of Canada, starting with the islands and the falls here as a natural landmark.
Yeah. To say it, I think I'll start. I'll do it in reverse. Cultural needs. Parks Canada. This year you get to go free in every park. Get a free pass in every park. It's kind of neat. That's their shtick this year, right? You get to go free because it's Canada's 150th. The Indian Act's 140th. To me, when you talk about the falls here, and I think of other falls, and I think of all the beautiful parks in Canada and all the beautiful spaces that I've been and that I haven't been, I think all of them kind of deserve that same acknowledgement you're talking about. It's not just here. I'm doing it from it's not just here. There's a lot of them. And how do you do that? How the heck do you do that? And then, so that's the first thing I'm thinking of. And then I'm thinking, I was at a talk the other day, and there was a woman, she was Métis from the prairies, and she was you remind me of her. She had a very gentle approach, and she said, there was a guy, it was a panel on architecture, and there was a guy who was very ticked at the world, and you know he actually talked with his fist clenched, you know, and he was all about fighting the fight, and it's not my shtick. The Métis woman was talking about what's wrong with just doing things together. That's what you're talking about, doing things together hand in hand. And so when there's sites like here and the thousands of other sites in Canada within all of the traditional territories that are shared throughout, there are lots of sites that not a lot has to happen except this to be acknowledged. That acknowledging the site and its significance and the people, obviously, that is a lot. We think it's all about owning and all that. It's about acknowledging, right? And that's the start. Some of it is about owning, by the way, but a lot of the sites, like here, the start is to acknowledge it in a real way, not just in a kind of a token way, but in a real way. And I think that's kind of a starting point, you know. And some of them are easy to acknowledge, some of them are less easy, but it can be. And the difficulty, it's like back to the heritage thing, is it gets caught up in legal matters. So, groups I talk with all the well, if we say that, we're going to have to run it through our lawyer, because that means we're acknowledging that we were wrong, right? And we're liable. Well, so there's only reconciliation as far as your lawyer allows you to go in terms of rights, right? And I mean, that's something no one talks about, but it's the truth, right? So back to my initial point, I think it's acknowledging and let the chips fall. Acknowledge and let's see what happens, right? And that'd be kind of my point of departure, whether it be here or all over Canada.
Oh, thank you. No additional thoughts. Back to Jeff over here.
Yeah, this is a question that I might have a bit to talk about because we've been dreaming about this for a while.
Okay.
In the broader community. So, you used the term Canadian cultural texture, I think, and how, particularly with this site physically is a space where Canada's three founding nations physically came together. The French, the English, the First Nations. And there is a sorry history, lots of sorry histories in there. Most of us are now painfully aware of the First Nations history. But arguably, if you spoke to the French, the Irish, you name it, all sorts of people that have been through these sites, by and large, it was not a good history. These islands call out for a new model for Canada, a model where, I think you said it, you would come here and feel welcome. I could be here, feel welcome. A new Canadian can be here and feel welcome. And how do you create that sense of true community and a sense of place. And I think a couple of things that were said earlier that I'm going to pick on. One is the private sector can move a lot faster than the government will. Because the government, when you talk about you can only go so far as your lawyers allow you to. We can do anything we decide to do. And there's risks to it. So, as a for instance, we freak the government out all the time because we will in Algonquin territory. I mean, there's no question. And yet they go, we have an unsettled treaty. I said, don't care, it's Algonquin territory. We are in the process of doing something. We're setting up a toll system that, essentially a tax is paid to the Algonquins when you build on your property. And it's freaking the federal government out because it's the precedent that we would set for LeBreton Flats and everywhere else where everybody could point to us and say, well, the private sector is prepared to do it. Why won't you do it? Right? So we get to do things like that, but I think more importantly, talking about spiritual things, I've been to the sunrise ceremony on Victoria Islands a number of times, and I always, the juxtaposition of these old lumber mills and a riverbank that is by and large contaminated and broken up pieces of concrete and industrial waste is not the right place for a sunrise ceremony. one of the things we've been pushing the NCC on, because we're renaturalizing all the riverbanks, giving those lands back for public access, is to say that both the east and the west point of this island should be Algonquin territory and should be available for those kinds of uses. It should have times when they can be programmed by those communities. Similarly, on the Quebec shoreline, the waterfront here has changed dramatically because of the industrial history. But if you think about how you would have accessed the falls, it wouldn't have actually been from the islands back prior to all the hydro works being upstream. The portage route was down Rue Portage in Gatineau. And that was physically the place where the tobacco ceremonies and those things happen. So what can we do to recognize that? And again, we can move very quickly on those things. So those are the kinds of things that if you look at our signage, it's trilingual. I was really happy to see, and this is thanks to Sam, it's called the Canadian and Indigenous Art Gallery now. The National Gallery now has trilingual signage. I'd never seen that before. We started it here 3 years ago. All of our placemaking signs, all of our wayfinding signs will be trilingual. Creating that sense of I'm going to say acknowledging history, but not getting stuck in it. This is we are where we are today, and several of you said we could be angry about the past, or we can move on. Success for me, I've had some minor glimpses of what it looks like. I had my 25th wedding anniversary, and we hosted here on this site, and I remember looking out. We had a couple hundred people there looking out, and I think Sam, you were there, and I had a whole bunch of Algonquin friends there. I had a whole bunch of friends that I had made from Hull and Gatineau because of this project. Then my friends who were Anglos from Ontario, and it wasn't like the Algonquins were there and the French were there. No, they're all together, all having a great time, all creating new memories together of what our modern Canadian community looks like. So placemaking can create those kinds of opportunities, and that's what I think these islands can and should do. And I'd also reiterate the point that's been made a couple of times: is it is a shame that collectively, because I don't think there's any one party to blame, but collectively, that we haven't seen more going on in Victoria Island. That's a discussion that's been going on for the better part of 40 years and has not been able to advance. And you know better than I do many of the complications of doing that. It's not that the government won't move. It's not that there's all sorts of complications. But collectively, we gotta push to make something there happen. Because I didn't comment on the American Embassy, but to me, I think the term is being used, the First Nations embassies. Now I would more call it. It's not an embassy. They're not visitors here. This is their government, right? And it should rival Parliament Hill. It should be of a scale and size that is as impressive as Parliament Hill, not something that's just beside it somewhere, right? So there's an opportunity to do some of that on these lands, and I think that would be an important statement to make. So,
Thank you, Jeff. I figured there might be some opportunity for back and forth here. Michel?
Two things. So do you have any leverage, I guess, in helping make that happen on Victoria Island? As a developer, is there any, or Heritage Canada, like that building would probably have to be deemed not Heritage Canada. So I guess that's cool. I really think that's cool that you're interested in that. And I forgot my second point, but it'll come back. I remember.
Oh.
I'm a kinetic thinker, so maybe I should have just stood up and sat down. Just a thought, so you were talking about having on your wayfindings the 3 languages. Could Anishinabeg be on the top?
it is.
It
is.
It's always.
Wow.
Well, not always, but
Well, more. I think that was the intention.
on labels we intend for it to be Algonquin, Anishinaabe
Yeah.
first, English, French.
Yeah.
And that comes from a circle of elders, as we're talking about, as Mike. As an individual, as long as it's there, representation is enough for me, but it wasn't enough for our elders. They're the ones who came forward and said, no, we come first each and every time.
Yeah.
We come before English and French. We have, if this is reconciliation, start with us.
Yeah.
And we want to be first and foremost, front and center at every opportunity. So when we talk about wayfinding systems, we're talking about using artistic expression, we're talking about art pieces, we're talking about the language, and we're talking about having that education between the public and the Algonquin people, so there's an understanding about these wayfinding systems, symbols that they're going to be seeing throughout the city, you know. So it really, it starts in the communities, and it's only supported by public sector governments and then private sectors who want to take that initiative and take it all the way. Anyone else?
Yeah.
So do you want me to answer, Michel?
Sure. About leverage? Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, first off, Anishinaabe absolutely first. And my view would be that it's Anishinaabe, French, English, only because French were here next, English were here last, and more importantly, the English are predominant now. And we really want to showcase the fact that that they should be welcoming for everyone. And a funny story on language. So you'll know that Quebec has a sign law on the language laws, and they're quite rigid about it. So French has to be twice as prominent as every other language. And if a sign is of a certain size, if it's a banner size, it can only be French. So we've humored them to a certain extent. So if you go by, you'll see we have welcome flags, and it's Pishishag. How do you say welcome?
Jashik.
Pishishag, yeah,
Jashik.
which is welcome in Anishinaabe, as I understand it. Bienvenue and welcome. So there was 2 bienvenue signs. Other than that, they're all the same size, right? We put up this big banner that said, I think it said welcome, welcome bienvenue Pishishag to Zibi. And they came by and they said, no, that's only got to be French. And I said, well, I'm happy to take the English off, but I'm not taking the Anishinaabe off. And she looked at me, she said, what is Anishinaabe? I said, well, that's the local language. They were here before you. She said, well, I'm sorry, but it's French only. And I said, okay. I should tell you that if you do that, then we'll make sure that our Algonquin friends know about it. And I'm sure you're going to read about it on the front page of the newspaper. And I'm going to go over it. Well, she refused to back down. I said, okay, so we called the local MLA and I said, now I really think this is a bad idea. I'm happy to go up there. I did. We went up and we cut the English off the sign. And she immediately said, no. You leave it up there. As a matter of fact, if you want to take the French off, you can. No, we can't. But those are the kinds of things that we do, and it raises that profile over and over and over again. With regards to Victoria Island, we absolutely have some input and some insight into how community building things can happen. And we get asked often, by different levels of government about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how is it going, and those types of things. The biggest challenge, and it's the challenge that we have as well. I would say that the federal government or the current stewards of Victoria Island, and I use that word steward on purpose, they would be extremely willing to do something of significance for the First Nations and for the Algonquin Anishinaabe First Nations. And probably the biggest stumbling block that exists is the nation itself. That the nation has very different viewpoints on things. So trying to get consensus amongst the Algonquin communities to move forward with a plan is probably the biggest single challenge you have. And if you look at, say, what's happening in Zibi, we have some communities that are extremely supportive, some that aren't, and which is what you would expect. I mean, I would say the same thing about any community here in Ottawa. Some of them, I'm sure, love what we do, and some of them don't. But trying to get sufficient consensus to be able to, with a united voice, say to the current stewards, number one, we want it back. Number two, we want to do something of significance with it. And if you could have that consensus, it would happen on a heartbeat, and you'd have people like me lining up to support. And I would not only support by lobbying, I would put our money where our mouth is and go and make that happen. But that work's got to start within the nation itself, I would say, first, is my view. And that may be a controversial thing for a white guy to say, but that's my sense of what the holdup is right now. So.
Thank you, Jeff.
So all the nations were on board at one point towards the center before the Harper government. But also, I think even the sunrise ceremony, there was all sorts of nations there with that brought their pipes. So in terms of, I think that the nations themselves have bigger issues than to figure out about a healing center in the middle of where they're not really even. So I think that empowering the local community, either I would say Ottawa, which is a conglomerate of all Indigenous people, and they already have a board. They already have Claudette Comenda is the president right now. So there's beautiful healing there. I think maybe empowering, maybe finding who could run the system or who could. I think Ottawa might be able to play a part in that.
Any other thoughts to add, Daniel?
Sure. Yeah, it kind of connects to everything that was said. I think with a process of reconciliation, and it was actually not my thoughts, the elders that I work with these days, it's connected to affirmation. So everyone says, okay, what do we do about reconciliation? What can we do? That's fine, that's the other that says that. In a sense, part of reconciliation is affording the time, and it can be much longer than people think. Just because someone talks about reconciliation doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow morning. Because it's again a hard thing, right? To accept things and then to digest it and then to move forward. It's a big move to undertake individually and culturally. And so reconciliation in planning, in architecture, and so on, in art, is something that requires an acknowledgement, like I said in the beginning, and then an affirmation. So when someone says, no, we want our language used, that's an affirmation. It's like, it's not about money, it's not about a building, it's about affirming, asserting oneself, right? And that takes a long, long time when you've been squished, right? It takes a long time. And so 2017, I keep going back to you, right? But 2017 is not a deadline, right? It's not like, that's it, that reconciliation's over, okay, next, right? It's not that. I'm old enough to remember what the Royal Commission, when the Royal Commission came out, and there was a move similar to this happening in Canadian culture. And now the Truth and Reconciliation reports come out, and there's a move. But it may take more waves for that affirmation to really, now I see youth really firm and proud, but it's not in every community, right? It's the push that's required, this strength that's required for young people and others to say, no, we want this. You know, what you're proposing in terms of reconciliation is not enough. Do you follow me? Because right now what's happening is all kinds of governments, NGOs, other people are saying, what can we do? But in actual fact, they don't do everything that you might want. They do what they want. The what can we do is nice to hear, but because I've proposed stuff, and for example, the thing that I said in the beginning, I say, well, you could have a statement that says, we could have done better. Nobody wants to do it because there's legal implications to that, right? So, on the other hand, what I'm talking about is, okay, there's lots of people say, what can we do? There's another side, right? Here's what we want you to do. Okay, so that belongs there too. That's in the room too. It's not just what can we do, because when someone says that, they have limits in their mind. It's not whatever you say, right? But it's like, never mind what you can do. Here's what we want you to do, right? It's that affirmation, I think, has to come. It's a dance, this reconciliation thing. It's not just the one way, oh, I'm sorry. That's not enough. It's, here's the thing, right? And when you talk about the falls, maybe that's a good symbolic one. Well, oh, you're wondering what to do? Well, they're there, right? And see what happens. See where that limit is, that line is. Right? Anyway.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
There's something interesting here.
Well, we had a fundraiser for the youth in Attawapiskat. They flew in the youth that they thought were troubled, and the idea, a Tribe Called Red played, and the idea was to excite these youth. And they were brought to Saw Video Gallery. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a dungeon in the basement, and the kids were afraid. It was almost like, I felt like it was like a bad experience for them. So in terms of what to do or what the government, it's been set out. Like Trudeau said the other day, cultural centers, what do you want in cultural centers? You want a TV and a pool table? It's been written. The work has been there. I don't think it's time to wait any longer. Like development is happening. Let's do it. You know?
When you mentioned earlier about how you'd like to see Ottawa Friendship Center, that's Pan-Aboriginal, take the lead, I disagree. It's got to be the original people first and foremost. And it's got to come from the community. And I would say put it in the hands of the female elders in the community and let them lead the way. You go.
You can actually make that happen with
Oh.
females.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been amazing. Just the beginning of hopefully further conversations among some of you who just met tonight. So I just want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists for being here and everyone in the audience. And yeah, actually, we should do a little Q&A. So is there any questions from the audience? Anicia, you've been writing some notes? All right, here we go.
I should scare you. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Gareth for reaching out to the Canadian Institute of Planners, because that is actually the smartest thing anyone can do when you're developing or when you're thinking of working with the community, an Indigenous community. First and foremost, you're looking at a planner, perhaps a planner like Monsieur, that has Indigenous community planning knowledge. So I hope you have one on board. Excellent. So thank you for recognizing that. That's first and foremost. I wanted to ask, what is enough engagement amongst the community? And maybe the both of you, and even you guys, when do you feel like that's enough, this is good? You mentioned 35 community meetings. And I think that's actually, it's sounding like that's the most appropriate thing to do, but when do you know it's enough? That's my question.
That's me.
Anybody.
Everybody who's experienced community engagement.
Don't be shy.
I can say in 1 sentence.
Okay.
When you're told it's enough.
When you're told it's enough.
That was my answer as well. I was going to say when the elders are ready to call it
Yeah.
complete, that's when you're done.
When they stop showing
You'll
up.
feel it.
you're
You'll
done.
feel it.
Yeah.
When they run out of things to
Yeah.
say and they
Yeah.
stop showing up, you're
Yeah.
Do you want to say a few words?
It's kind of what, there's no number, and that's what I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And that's what goes against the business model of the consultant.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
And I think even they're providing the recommendations all the way to the end. Like they're cutting the ribbon and and ideas and things that weren't said in circle time are still coming out. And then even afterwards, they're presenting recommendations by email. They're sending in information. So there's never really over. They're always looking at ways they can improve, if it's for the next project or something that they can contribute within projects well after it's over. We've done parks, we've done, we've done the Primacy Station, the arts and culture within that. So, I mean, our people are still actively engaged, and I think the elders, they want to be participants all the way to the end. They want to see that project through. They want to be there when when that ribbon's being cut or the opening ceremonies are happening. So I think it's never quite over. It's always like a 5-year deal. And I think it gives them a sense of something to do in their life, and it makes them feel like they're leaving something with the youth when they're telling those stories. And they've never been given that opportunity, so it's something new for them as well. Not so much our elders anymore. We're getting accustomed to doing a lot of partnership projects with the city. But I think our people understand what it takes to see projects through now. And hopefully politics doesn't take that much of an influence any longer. I think when they're with the city of Ottawa, the projects are fairly done well with the elders, and it's giving them the time, giving them the space, giving them the opportunity to have that voice, because it's never been done before, and it really benefits. I've yet to see a project fail when it includes our elders and letting them lead the way. There's always that added value when they're along with us in anything we do. Anyways. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm one that think that consensus should be above 50%, you know, so I think getting as many people involved, and once people are happy about a project, they're going to participate in the project. So just gathering community, I think the word gather is amazing, but also I think youth is important to have consult with the youth and the trends.
I'll take a shot at this one too. And you triggered a memory for me, right? Because I was around, and don't want to age myself, but I was around when our catalog came out too. So, or the Royal Proclamation, yeah. So, anyways, and it sits in 10 dusty volumes now on everybody's back of everybody's shelves, right? But at the time when it came out, it was trending. We wrote that into every proposal. And now when we write a proposal for funding, we write in the TRC, and our catalog doesn't get looked at anymore. And it relates to this other project that I'm involved in, which is I'm helping a couple of researchers with discovering how First Nations people learn math pre-contact, so that we can engage those same principles in current math classrooms. So I've gone from somebody who walked into the community to work with culture, and now I'm a math teacher and an ethno-mathematician. But anyway, so when they came to me with this project and said, will you consult, will you come to the classroom, will you teach the kids to bead, and we'll figure this out together, and I went, okay, so how are you gonna come back? Are you gonna research the heck out of us and walk away? Because there's 10 million papers out there on us that can tell you anything you want to know. You're not doing anything new. How are you going to continue to engage the community throughout the 3 years that you're funded for this project, and continue to do that after? So that's where, and this is the first point, is where when you are finished, are you going to stop your connection with the local people? Is that where it's going to end? Exactly.
I get too many friends.
And well, yeah, the friends too, but there's always has to be continual engagement. And you know, and that takes on a responsibility for us too. I was just in another engagement session with another organization in Ottawa, and there was some controversy around the grand opening and who was going to attend it and why we were attending it. And there's two of us in different spots, but one felt it wasn't the right place, that celebration wasn't the right action. And I said, it's their, and my feeling on it was, it's their ceremony. They've invited me. But I'm not going to celebrate, I'm going to be their witness. I'm gonna go be their witness that they did this, that they consulted, they did it right, and I wanna be their witness. And that was my feeling, was there's my responsibility of that two-way street, is that they did the work and now I have to recognize it. So I'm gonna make the extra effort to attend their opening and continue to be involved so that I can be their witness that they did it. And that was, I don't know if that went too far off topic, but that's how I feel. It's two-way street.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from, because in our community we also have 10,000 PhD papers, and there's not one angle that they haven't covered, you know, over the years. But what I did want to say, when you touched a note there about having the longevity within the cultural projects in the city, that is a huge question in our community, and I'm not going to deny that fact, is that how is it that somebody can include our culture and find that way to include that and for lack of a better word, maybe in perpetuity, that it always remains, because our culture will always be here. It can't change after 25 years. And that's a stereotype that you're hearing coming out of the communities, is that, well, what if in 40 years Zibi is no longer Zibi? Well, we have to find ways to ensure that it remains Zibi on the river forever, and communicate that not just to the nation but to Canada, that we mean business, but we also mean, I guess, what's the word here? No. I mean, ensuring that culture
Permanence.
preservation is what I'm looking for, and that we can have a trust with private sector and public sector, that our culture will be respected for a long time, since time immemorial, all the way till the end, so we can no longer share. But that's how I feel about that, is that we need to respect our culture. We also have to ensure our people that we're going to respect it forever. In our language, we always say "Kagigegamig." It means forever and always. So in our language, it's a beautiful language. It's very descriptive, and if we're going to be using that, we have to respect it to the highest stability we can, within our cultural sharing in the cities.
Great question. Hopefully great answers as well. I thought they were wonderful. Did you have any other questions? Is there anybody else? We can throw it back to Anicia. I think she's got some good ones lined up. All right.
Sorry, I'm really excited. I'm on this journey, this educational journey, so I get a little overexcited. But I did want to ask a question. We were talking about Ottawa, and you guys are so passionate about your Algonquin culture. How would you feel about a policy that's national for Indigenous community planning or design? And how can you do it and do it properly without obviously making it a cookie cutter policy, but addressing some of the issues that all communities, like, is there a commonality, and what are the differences, and how can you do it justice?
Again. Personally, from what I've understood with urban planning and Indigenous inclusion, is that it's got to be meaningful. That means that there's got to be resources attached to that for the communities to actively engage and to transport their people, and accommodations within the evening if it's a week-long stint. It's got to be meaningful, and there has to be a way for these people to engage, because Canada has taken enough from First Nations people that it's got to be from the heart, and it's got to be enough where First Nations people can share that culture, but do it in a safe way where they're feeling they're a part of it. Yeah.
I got nothing.
Well, that is.
That's shocking. Christina?
Oh, me? Nope. I think you did it. I honestly think you spoke of it when you said those 7 steps. I think you nailed that about that question. The only thing that, we talk about, I think one thing that Zibi deserves credit for is that not only did, when you started the council, I forget the word. Miigwech Council. You don't just have elders sitting there, you have young people sitting there like Jose and Sam. And I think that, if you look at our culture in the medicine wheel, the elders and the youth sit across from each other. And I think it's important that if people are going to do this consultation, that we have to stop, this is going to sound really awful, but putting the elders on the pedestal, that we have to start giving more credit to our youth, like when we get asked for openings and stuff like that and consultations. We don't have elders left that speak our language, but I have youth who are learning our language and can open things in the language, and I offer that out, and they go, really? I would love that. So let our youth do some things too that lifts them up and sit them with an elder, or there's other formalities around that I think are important, and I think that's the education piece that's missing, that you have the structure that we need to do some more about educating about consultation, about doing it in a way that it's not one person leading everything, right? We're in charge. So it's just, again, and I'll go back to the first thing I said, is reconciliation is messy, and we don't know what the rules are, but we have to try, and everybody has a different idea.
And now I got something.
All right. There you go.
So, in what I call the before time, when the Europeans arrived, architecture and planning were the same thing. They were part of the same, they were the same activity. And that always stuck with me. It's kind of a neat thing. That's part one. Part two, in 1998, I was invited to a ceremony in a community out west. And it was the first day they were going to start building their longhouse. There's a big longhouse tradition all the way, Coast Salish, Stolo, and higher north, Haida and so on. And so I show up for the ceremony. And there's a little ceremony that goes on and whatnot, and then there's this point it stops, and I knew that community really well. And an elder got up, and with his heel, he traced out the outline of the building. I said, oh, this is kind of cool, you know, okay. But they built the building following his dimensions and his instructions. He wasn't from the community, this elder. And I thought it was really interesting because I study architecture, I teach it, I'm all over the place with this stuff. Then 6 months go by and I go to another opening ceremony, or another construction startup ceremony, and here's the same guy. Older man, elder from the island. And this went on for a number of years until one day I realized he's the architect. He's the go-to man who has, for all the Coast Salish, well, not all, but a lot of them, he's got the knowledge. He's the architect, unacknowledged by the outsiders, but everybody knows, right? So if I had slides here, I'd keep here till midnight. But all these longhouses are different. But this guy is the go-to guy for details on architecture. Okay? That's the second part of what I want to say. Third part I want to say, that I want to talk about. I went last week, I spent in Fort Nelson First Nation. Fort Nelson is almost at the border of BC Yukon border. In the middle of far. Anyway, three things struck me there in the community, and I should show you on my phone because I have the photos. They have in the school, there is just one school, they're a big school. They have like a pit, it's kind of circular and it's stepped down, okay? You descend into it. And in the morning, every morning of the week, there's 150 kids and the teachers get together there. And they talk for 15 minutes about what they're going to do today. Because different people, it's all organized. But the circle is the key. That's how they start all the days. And then in their health and wellness center, they got another circle. And so I asked, what's this one for? If there's a conflict in the community, the bigger the conflict, the lower you sit, and everyone's around you, and you got to resolve it, like now. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And then they have across the landscape, there's all different buildings that no one talks about. One of them is the Roundhouse in the Ojibwe territory by Fort Francis, all those areas, all those communities there. One is the longhouses out west. There's the longhouses here, but I discovered a new building I didn't know existed at Fort Nelson. It's circular, and they call it their
Lodge?
No. Now I forgot, but anyway, I'll show you pictures in a minute. But this building, it's quite evocative, and it's circular, and they do all their ceremonies there, whether they be traditional or whether it's graduation, it goes on in there. So they got the circle going on every day in school, for conflict resolution in the Health and Wellness Center, and for celebration. And my whole point to this is no architect, no planner in that community. The architect and the planners are within, they don't call themselves that, but they do it, right? And there's a lot of examples like that that are quite evocative, and you'd be surprised how, you have to have architects and planners, of course. I'm a planner, so I'm the first. You need a planner. But there's a lot of planning and architecture and environmental design that goes on without the capital letters, right? And I think that those, I call them knowledge brokers in the communities. They're key because once you get to know them, you get an insight into, oh, that's why you do it this way or whatever, right? And so that's part Anicia, of your answers to find the people in the community. They might not be in that community, right? Because like that elder, he's the only guy that I know of in the whole Coast Salish territory that's the go-to architect.
Knowledge keeper.
And no one's going to tell you. No one will tell you in the community, right? Knowledge keeper and knowledge broker who's going to share it.
Mhm.
So there,
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? So that's part of the key.
Yeah.
I have a date with my wife.
Amazing. Let's wrap.
I told her I think I'm gone by 6, so.
Okay.
That's more
I need to,
important.
Yeah. We'll say thank you very much, Jeff, for coming.
I have a
And
quick question for you.
can we exchange contact?
One quick one?
Yeah.
So to reverse it, so you're in a position now of hiring like the Conti construction. I guess I'm at the grassroots level, you're at the top level. So right now they're cleaning up. Are they becoming partners? Is there other types of relationships that are, almost like equal that are being proposed? Like, is there any?
The story I love to tell is most people think that we hired DeConti. DeConti hired me first. There was a job up on the reserve. We worked for them, and that's how we started our relationship. Well, actually, I got to know them because we started early engagement on Zibi. But at the end of the day, we worked for them first before they worked for us, so to speak. So this whole idea of hierarchy, life is about a series of relationships, and the relationships that matter don't really have a hierarchy in them. I think Sam's seen me interact with Andy and Wanda. Yeah, they're over there. They're a service supplier to the project for sure. But so that would be the first point. The second one is no. It's our goal that all aspects of not only the project but as the developer we finish one day. Like we finish building and now these are somebody else's properties. So it's our goal to be sure that in everything from say our lease documents, our purchase and sale documents, that there are undertakings to ensure that not only the First Nations or Anishinabeg initiatives we have, but our environmental initiatives, our other social initiatives are embedded into the community. And think about it, if you want to come and set up a business here, there'll be a charter you sign that says you're going to behave certain ways, and that you believe in the values of the place. And part of that will be First Nations, but they'll be much broader than just that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. But in 10 years, you want to be out of the, like when they're going to own it, like other people.
Yeah, I mean, we'll so if you think about property development, then we don't own our projects forever, right? If you look, the project that we built with the Anglican diocese up the hill here is a multi-residential. We build it, and then people buy homes there, and now that's their place. So they will absolutely, like these buildings will own for a long, long time. But again, at some point in time we won't. But there will be, if you think about seniors' homes and there's a group talking to us about a kindergarten. Those are things that we won't have a role to play once those are built, right? Yeah.
If you want to bring your wife, a sealskin bracelet, you may.
Gift to get you off the hook there, Jeff.
I can explain to her why I'm late.
Thank you for sticking around.
I'd love to stay longer.
Oh, no, no.
Because the girl gave you that.
Jeff,
Giving you credit.
do you have any business cards on you by chance? It'd be good for Michel or anyone else who doesn't know you as well.
Can you share your planners?
Yeah, so FO10, here's Perkins and Will in San Francisco. Did the master plan. FO10, I think is on both sides. And I know you're interested in planning, so we won the Canadian Best Plan, the North American and the International award for that. So I think I might have some business. Yeah.
If you can't find, I'm sure you're reachable through the contact and everything. But I think this is probably a good time to wrap it up. And everybody, like I said, I hope we'll stay in touch. And
Just a sec, I go. No.
he's faking us out. Okay. And then Michel will do a breakdancing demonstration for us with his bum shoulder.
Battle, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff, and thank you again for coming. And I just want to say, let's give a round of applause to our panel for doing this.